A human man's love for an alien woman ended a years-long war. The war had dragged on so long that Lieutenant Kael sometimes wondered if the stars themselves were bored. From his cockpit, the battlefields of space looked less like epic clashes of destiny, and more like someone had spilled glowing marbles across a black carpet. Ships flared, shields broke, weapons sang their relentless songs, and still the endless rhythm of war continued, as if no one remembered how it had started. Kael had once tried asking his commanding officer why they were fighting, only to receive the sort of glare that suggested the question itself was unpatriotic. Since then, he saved his curiosity for more pressing issues, like why the fleet's coffee dispensers tasted like reheated engine oil. On that particular day, Kael was busy thumping the side of a ship's console with one fist, muttering threats at a malfunctioning sensor, when the call came through. A Vaelari vessel had been disabled, drifting near the edges of the contested zone. His orders were simple: intercept, secure, and return to base. Nothing about the message suggested anything remarkable. It certainly didn't suggest that Kael's life was about to become a complicated mess of destiny, sarcasm, and interstellar politics. He sighed, kicked the console once more for good measure, and turned his ship toward the coordinates. The Vaelari ship was small, sleek, and far too elegant compared to the clunky workhorse Kael flew. It hovered in space like some exotic bird with broken wings, its hull scarred but still beautiful in a way that made Kael's own ship feel like a rusting trash bin by comparison. He latched on with the docking clamps and powered through the usual checklist of don't die while boarding the enemy. What he didn't expect was the sight that greeted him when the airlock hissed open. Standing in the dim light was a woman. Not human, not exactly, though the resemblance was so striking he had to blink several times to make sure. She was tall, her features sharp and luminous, her hair silver as if spun from starlight itself. But it was her ears that marked her as unmistakably alien, long, sweeping, and curved slightly backward, twitching in irritation as she studied him with golden eyes that glowed faintly. Kael, in his infinite wisdom, greeted her with the first words that came to mind. Nice ears." The silence that followed could have shattered asteroids. Her gaze narrowed, and one ear flicked in a way that made Kael certain she was either amused or about to vaporize him with some hidden alien weapon. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying the kind of regal tone that suggested she'd been trained since birth to speak as though everything was a proclamation. "I am Serenya, daughter of the High Sovereign of the Vaelari Empire. And you, clearly, are an idiot." Kael blinked. Twice. "That's fair. I get that a lot." He should have stunned her, bound her, and dragged her back to his ship immediately. That was protocol, and Kael had a long, miserable record of never breaking protocol. But something about the way she stood, proud even in defeat, sparked a stubborn thread of defiance inside him. He raised his blaster halfway, then lowered it with a sigh. "Look, I don't suppose we can skip the whole prisoner hostage thing. I'm not exactly a fan of paperwork." Her lips curved into a faint smile. "You think you can simply walk away? You've boarded the vessel of your sworn enemy." Kael shrugged. "Technically, yes. But also technically, I'd rather not get court-martialed for ruining my superior officer's day with extra forms. You'd be surprised how much wrath paperwork inspires." She tilted her head, studying him like one might study a strange insect. Her ears twitched again, this time with what Kael swore looked suspiciously like suppressed laughter. "Your people are at war with mine, and you speak of paperwork." "Trust me," Kael said, lowering himself onto a nearby console as if this were a casual chat in a spaceport diner. "War is easier to survive than bureaucracy." What began as tension eased, just slightly, into something stranger, conversation. Serenya asked questions about Earth's fleets, about humanity's obsession with resource expansion, about whether humans always smelled faintly of burnt ozone. Kael, in turn, found himself blurting out that her ship smelled nicer than his apartment back on Earth, and that her ears were not only distracting but also kind of majestic. She rolled her eyes so hard he thought she might sprain them, but she didn't demand his execution, which Kael counted as progress. When he finally transmitted to command that he had secured the vessel, he deliberately left out the details of his encounter. He didn't mention Serenya's name. He certainly didn't mention her ears. He simply reported, in the driest tone he could manage, that the enemy vessel had been neutralized and was ready for retrieval. His commander barked back an order to hold position and await pickup. Kael ended the call quickly before his conscience had time to stage a protest. Serenya crossed her arms, golden eyes fixed on him with unnerving calm. "You should have killed me." Kael leaned back, forcing a grin he didn't entirely feel. "And missed the chance to ruin my career for the dumbest possible reason? Not a chance." For the first time, she laughed, soft, musical, and utterly disarming. The sound echoed in the narrow cabin, oddly warm against the cold hum of dying systems. Kael had no idea then what that laugh would mean, or how deeply it would alter the course of the war. All he knew was that, for the first time in years, space didn't feel quite so empty. Kael had never thought much about guarding prisoners. The manual had a list of rules, most of them involving words like protocol, restraints, and under no circumstances. None of those words seemed especially useful when your prisoner was a princess who could, with alarming ease, dismantle the locks on her cell door just by humming at them. He found this out on the first night aboard the station, when the alarms blared and Kael sprinted down the corridor only to find Serenya sitting calmly outside her quarters, arms crossed, glaring at the ceiling as though the alarm offended her personally. "I was bored," she said simply, as though that explained everything. "You," Kael panted, trying to catch his breath. "You can't just break out of prison because you're bored." Her golden eyes slid toward him. "And yet I did." The alarms howled louder. Kael punched the override panel, silencing the noise before his superior officers arrived. He pointed at the open door, then at her, then back at the door. "Please, for the love of all things caffeinated, get back inside. I don't need more disciplinary reports. My file is already thicker than the fleet manual." Serenya arched a long eyebrow. "Do you always whine this much?" "Only when I'm about to lose my job." She smirked, the kind of smirk that said she had already calculated exactly how much chaos she could cause before he snapped. Still, she stood and walked back into her cell, her ears twitching with amusement. Kael muttered something about needing hazard pay and sealed the door again, though he had a strong suspicion it wouldn't hold her long. Over the next days, their interactions settled into a strange rhythm. Kael brought her meals, which she sniffed suspiciously before declaring that humans apparently subsisted on compressed sadness. He explained that the gray brick in front of her was a ration bar, engineered for maximum nutrition. She broke it in half, eyed it as though it might bite her, and said, "Maximum punishment, perhaps." When Kael snuck her contraband snacks from the officer's mess, nothing more exotic than a real piece of fruit, she nearly glowed with delight. He teased her about her obvious enthusiasm, but when she told him Vaelari food shimmered, with light drawn directly from their suns, Kael realized the humble apple must have seemed as dull as gravel. Still, she ate it all, crunching slowly, as though memorizing the taste. Between meals, she asked questions. Why did humans colonize barren rocks when they could barely manage their own planet? Why were Earth soldiers willing to die for commands they never questioned? Why did humans find the idea of long ears so strange? Kael tried to answer honestly, though sometimes his honesty slipped into rambling complaints about his captain's obsession with uniform buttons or the endless boredom of guard duty. "You are a strange man," Serenya said one evening, watching him attempt to fix his wrist communicator with a fork. Kael tapped the device, which emitted a sharp spark. "I prefer the word resourceful." "Clumsy," she countered. "Creative." "Hopeless." He grinned. "Optimistic." She laughed then, a quiet, surprised laugh that softened her usual regal posture. It wasn't the laugh of a princess raised on ceremony, but of someone who had, for just a moment, forgotten where she was. Kael found himself memorizing that sound. Word spread quickly through the station that Kael was too friendly with his prisoner. Other officers made jokes, some sharp, some suspicious. He tried to ignore them, though once, when a fellow lieutenant suggested he was smitten with those ridiculous ears, Kael very nearly threw his ration bar at him. He didn't, mostly because ration bars were too valuable as improvised doorstops. Late one cycle, As the stars wheeled silently beyond the viewport, Serenya asked a question that made him freeze. "Why did you spare me?" Kael leaned back in his chair, staring at the constellations. He wanted to say something clever, something to deflect, but the truth slipped out instead. "Because killing you felt wrong. Because when I looked at you, you didn't seem like an enemy. Just someone caught in the same storm as the rest of us." She was silent for a long while, her ears angled slightly forward, listening. Then she said softly, "No human has ever looked at me that way before." He tried to lighten the moment. "Well, to be fair, I was also distracted by your ears. Do they pick up radio signals?" Her glare returned instantly. "You are impossible. Impossibly charming. Impossibly irritating." Their banter resumed, and the heaviness of the moment dissolved, but the words lingered in Kael's mind long after he left her cell. He wondered if she carried them too, tucked away beneath the layers of duty and pride. When the summons finally came from high command, Kael expected a reprimand for letting his prisoner play escape artist. Instead, the orders were simple and chilling. The princess was to be transferred to a secure tribunal. There, her fate would be decided, not by trial, but by execution. Kael stood frozen in the corridor after receiving the message, the weight of it pressing down on him harder than any battlefield. He thought of her laugh, her endless questions, the way she wrinkled her nose at ration bars, the way she tilted her ears when she was amused. He thought of the war, stretching endlessly behind and ahead, and how, for the first time, he had met someone who made him imagine peace might not be impossible. When he walked back into her cell, his voice betrayed none of this. He smiled crookedly and said, "Well, good news. You're getting a transfer. Bad news. The company car is terrible." Her golden eyes narrowed, reading more in his tone than his words. "What are you telling me?" Kael swallowed hard, forcing another grin. "Nothing important. Just stay ready. Things might get complicated." For the first time, the humor couldn't quite hide the dread curling in his chest. Kael had been accused of many things in his career: recklessness, insubordination, once even criminal misuse of a mop. But outright treason was a new milestone. He tried to console himself with the thought that at least his record would look impressively diverse if anyone ever bothered to read it. Unfortunately, the treason charge came with the added complication of execution, which was why, at that moment, he was sneaking through the station's maintenance ducts with Princess Serenya crawling behind him and muttering about how undignified this was for a member of the Vaelari royal line. "Do you know what happens to ears in a vent this narrow?" she whispered sharply. "Do you know what happens to humans who stop to argue in a vent this narrow?" Kael shot back. "They get court-martialed in very cramped spaces." Her ear twitched, brushing the metal, and she sighed with exaggerated suffering. "If we are caught, I will tell them this was entirely your idea." Kael grinned in the dark. Good, because it was. He had spent hours piecing together the escape plan, if plan was the right word for something stitched from desperation and an alarming number of stolen cleaning supplies. The tribunal orders had been clear. Serenya was to be executed within 3 cycles. That gave Kael less time than it usually took him to fix the coffee synthesizer, which was saying something. His options were limited: smuggle her out, or watch her die and live with the fact that he'd done nothing. Their crawl ended at a grated panel. Kael pressed his ear to it, listening. Beyond, he heard the low hum of hangar machinery and the occasional bark of a mechanic swearing at uncooperative equipment. Perfect. He pried the panel loose and dropped into the shadows, wincing as his boots clanged loudly on the metal. Serenya followed, landing far more gracefully, her long ears flicking at the sound of distant voices. Kael produced their disguises with a flourish: 2 maintenance jumpsuits and a pair of mop handles. Serenya stared at the outfit as though it had personally insulted her lineage. "You expect me to impersonate a janitor?" "It's brilliant," Kael said, tugging the jumpsuit over his uniform. "Nobody ever suspects janitors. They see you, they look away, because deep down they know you hold the true power, control of the cleaning supplies." She pinched the bridge of her nose, muttering something in Vaelari that sounded suspiciously like a curse. Still, she pulled on the jumpsuit, though the ears ruined the disguise immediately. Kael solved the problem by plopping a bulky maintenance helmet over her head. It wobbled dangerously. Far too large. There, he said. Perfect. You look absolutely ridiculous. I despise you, she muttered from inside the helmet. Good. That's very convincing janitor energy. Together, they pushed a hovercart loaded with broken parts across the hangar floor, trying to look invisible. For a few miraculous minutes, it worked. Mechanics strode past. Engineers shouted about faulty reactors, and no one paid them the slightest attention. Kael began to think his absurd plan might actually succeed. Then the hovercart hit a bump. The helmet tipped back, and Serenya's long ears sprang into view like banners declaring their doom. Hey, a voice barked. You too, stop right there. Kael's heart lurched. Serenya's hand twitched toward the concealed plasma knife he'd given her, but Kael hissed. Not yet. He spun toward the guard, plastering on the dumbest grin he could muster. Just, regular maintenance here. Cleaning ducts, scrubbing reactors, saving the galaxy one mop at a time. The guard squinted. I don't recognize either of you. That's because, Kael said quickly, we're new. Very new. So new we're practically hypothetical. The guard frowned. Serenya tilted her helmet forward to hide her ears, then added in a perfect imitation of a weary janitor. We clean toilets. The guard blanched and waved them on. Carry on. Kael nearly collapsed with relief. See, what did I tell you? Janitors are terrifying. They reached the shuttle bay, where Kael's stolen craft, a patched-up freighter older than both of them combined, waited in the corner. They boarded quickly, Kael fumbling through startup sequences while Serenya secured the hatch. The engines groaned to life with the enthusiasm of a dying animal. Kael slapped the console. Don't you dare die on me now. I know you've been through a lot, but we're all counting on you. Serenya arched a brow. You are negotiating with your ship? It responds better to encouragement than threats. The freighter sputtered, then roared grudgingly to life. Kael grinned at her. See, works every time. As the ship lifted from the bay, alarms blared again. Fleet scrambled, comms lit up with orders to intercept, and Kael shoved the freighter into hyperspace before anyone could get a clean shot. The stars stretched into lines, the universe folded around them, and just like that, they were gone. For several long moments, silence filled the cabin, broken only by the groans of the overtaxed engines. Then Serenya removed the oversized helmet, her long ears flicking free, and turned to Kael. You realize both of our governments will now hunt us to the edge of the galaxy? Yep, Kael said, adjusting the controls with an almost cheerful grin. Congratulations, Your Highness. You're officially an outlaw. Welcome to the club. She stared at him, incredulous. You are mad. Not mad, Kael said, leaning back with a smug smile. Just criminally optimistic. Despite herself, she laughed again. And though the galaxy now wanted them both dead, Kael decided that laugh was worth every risk. The stolen freighter wheezed out of hyperspace and immediately began making noises that suggested it resented still being alive. Kael smacked the console until the rattling stopped, though he suspected it was more out of pity than obedience. Serenya, strapped into the co-pilot's chair, gave him the look of someone evaluating whether trusting him had been the greatest mistake of her life. You stole a ship that complains, she said flatly. It's character, Kael replied. Every great ship has personality. This one's personality is mostly grumpy grandparent. The navigation system flickered with a map of the neutral sector, a scattering of stations and colonies that both empires had deemed unworthy of conquering. Kael pointed at the largest blot of light. That's Station Havelock, a trading hub. Plenty of smugglers, mechanics, and shady noodle vendors. Perfect place to disappear. Serenya raised a brow. Or perfect place for bounty hunters to find us. Optimism, princess. You've got to practice it. Think of the noodles. Docking was an ordeal. The freighter shuddered so violently Kael thought it might spontaneously disassemble into a souvenir kit, but they managed to land. The airlock creaked open to the chaos of a neutral sector bazaar. Merchants hawking strange glowing fabrics, cybernetic limbs twitching on display tables, food stalls emitting aromas that ranged from heavenly spice to possible chemical weapon. Serenya wrinkled her nose at the din. I see humans are not the only ones who enjoy disorder, she said. Kael grinned. This is what freedom smells like. Also fried squid. Don't inhale too deeply. Their first stop was a mechanic's stall. The proprietor was a squat alien with 4 arms and goggles, so large he looked permanently surprised. He tapped the freighter's diagnostics with a claw and immediately declared, "Haunted. Your ship is haunted." Kael blinked. "Haunted?" The alien nodded gravely. "Definitely ghosts. Probably 3. Maybe 4. Serenya folded her arms. "Nonsense." The mechanic hissed. "Lady, I know haunted when I see haunted. You'll need an exorcism, not a tune-up." Kael leaned toward Serenya, whispering, "See? Personality." They left the mechanic to argue with his own tools and wandered deeper into the bazaar. Serenya stopped at a stall selling glowing crystals, suspended in levitation fields. She reached out, her fingers brushing one of them, and the stone hummed faintly in resonance with her touch. The merchant's eyes widened. "Vaelari," he breathed. "Your people still sing to the stars." Serenya quickly pulled her hand back, but Kael caught the flicker of longing on her face. He nudged her gently. "Go ahead. Nobody's arresting us here." Her ears twitched, betraying her hesitation, but she didn't touch the crystal again. Instead, she moved on, her posture stiff. Kael followed, pretending not to notice the way she glanced back once. At a dingy cantina, they found a priest with half his body replaced by glowing circuitry. He welcomed them with a voice that buzzed in multiple tones at once. "You seek refuge. You carry danger. But love is the only stable quantum field." Kael nearly choked on his drink. "I'm sorry, what?" The priest's eyes blinked asynchronously. "Love bends probabilities. It warps outcomes. Stronger than gravity. More stable than time." Serenya studied the priest carefully, as though he'd just recited an equation. "Your words are poetic, but hardly scientific." "Science is only poetry with better funding," the priest replied serenely. Kael muttered, "Remind me never to drink before philosophy hour." Despite the bizarre encounters, for a brief time, they almost felt safe. Serenya let her guard down enough to laugh at the chaos around them, even daring Kael into trying food that looked suspiciously like glowing worms. He gagged dramatically, while she watched with ears twitching in amusement. But safety never lasted. It wasn't long before the station's comm boards lit with warnings. Earth's fleet had entered the sector, demanding access. Moments later, Vaelari warships appeared, bristling with weapons. The neutral sector was suddenly anything but neutral. In the cantina, patrons bolted for their ships. Kael and Serenya exchanged a single look. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the docks. But before they could reach the freighter, the station shuddered under the first exchange of fire. Docking clamps sealed, trapping ships in place. Red alarms flashed. Kael slammed a fist against the lock controls, cursing. "Great. We're stuck in the middle of a war zone. Again. I swear the universe is addicted to irony." Serenya pulled him back as an explosion ripped through a nearby corridor. Smoke filled the air. Lights flickered, and through the chaos came the sight of 2 vast fleets outside the viewport, circling each other like predators. Her voice was calm but firm. "They are here for us." Kael knew she was right. Earth would brand him a traitor. The Vaelari Empire would demand their princess back. Neither side wanted them alive, at least not together. He tried to muster a grin, though his stomach churned. "Well, I guess that makes us very popular." Serenya squeezed his hand tighter than she probably realized. Popularity is not survival. And outside, the stars filled with fire once more, 2 empires converging on a single, impossible choice. The station's corridors shook with every blast from outside. Kael and Serenya pressed against the viewport, watching the stars ignite with crossfire. Dozens of warships from Earth and the Vaelari Empire faced each other, weapons charged, fleets arranged like chess pieces. And in the middle of all of it sat one decrepit station and 2 fugitives, who had somehow managed to drag both civilizations into the same place at the same time. Kael exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. You ever get the feeling the galaxy is just messing with us for fun? Serenya's ears twitched back, her eyes fixed on the growing lines of battle. If this is fun, then the galaxy has a cruel sense of humor. Good, Kael said, forcing a smile he didn't feel. Means we'll fit right in. Over the station intercom, Earth's admiral gave his ultimatum. Surrender the Vaelari princess and the traitor Kael, or face annihilation. Seconds later, the Vaelari flagship replied with equal fury. Return Serenya immediately, or they would burn the station to its atoms. The words clashed in the air like blades. The station itself groaned under the weight of tension. Hundreds of lives trapped between empires. Kael swallowed, his hand tightening around Serenya's. Well, that's clear. They both want us. Guess we're trending. Her golden eyes flicked to him, sharp but softened by something deeper. You do realize what will happen if either side takes us? Yep, Kael said. We'll be executed, paraded, maybe stuffed and mounted on some general's wall. Not a fan of any of those options. Then what do you suggest? Kael looked out at the fleets, his heart hammering. He thought of all the times he'd laughed things off, cracked jokes when he should have been afraid, turned fear into sarcasm because that was the only way to survive. But now, staring at Serenya, he realized survival wasn't enough. He didn't want to just live. He wanted something bigger, something worth living for. So he pulled her forward, toward the central comm tower of the station. Technicians screamed at him to stop, but he waved them aside, dragging Serenya up the steps until they stood before the broadcasting array. The console blinked, waiting. Kael pressed the open channel. His voice rang out across the void, carried to every ship in orbit. This is Lieutenant Kael of Earthfleet. And yes, also Kael the deserter, Kael the idiot, Kael the guy who once set fire to cafeteria microwave. Long story. Point is, I've made a choice. I won't let you kill her. If you fire on Serenya, you'll have to fire on me too. And maybe that's what this war needs, two bodies floating together in space. Proof that you can burn everything and still win nothing. Serenya stiffened beside him, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she lifted her chin, her voice clear and steady as she added, "And I am Serenya, daughter of the High Sovereign. I should hate him. I was raised to. Yet here I stand, at his side, not as your prisoner, not as your prize, but as someone who believes the war must end. If you cannot see that, then destroy us now. We will not run again." The silence that followed was heavier than gunfire. For a long moment, Kael thought nothing had changed, that both fleets would unleash their fury anyway. But then, across the channel, laughter crackled. A Vaelari captain muttered, "If our princess is truly willing to date a human this clumsy, perhaps peace is less impossible than we thought." On the Earth side, another officer snorted, "Frankly, I'd rather sign a treaty than write the report explaining how two runaways humiliated both our fleets." The tension cracked. Orders barked back and forth, sharp but wavering. The weapons powered down. Slowly, impossibly, the fleets began to disengage. The station filled with cheers and disbelief as the impossible happened. After decades of blood and fire, both empires backed away, without firing a single shot. Kael slumped against the console, trembling with adrenaline. Serenya's ears tilted toward him, her expression unreadable until the faintest smile curved her lips. "You really do have a talent for reckless speeches," she said. "Thanks," Kael panted. "If this pilot thing doesn't work out, I'll try motivational speaking. Assuming we're not vaporized first." They weren't. Days later, representatives from both sides sat at a long table on neutral ground, signing the first fragile accords of peace. Serenya stood beside her father, Kael at her side. Both of them whispered about, questioned, doubted, but unbroken. The galaxy had shifted, all because one human and one Vaelari had refused to let go. Kael found himself changed. Once he had fought because orders told him to. Now he understood fighting meant nothing without purpose. Survival wasn't enough. Laughter wasn't just a shield, but a reminder of what made life worth living. He had always joked that the universe was laughing at him. Now, he realized maybe the universe was laughing with him. When the final signatures were made and the treaty sealed, Serenya leaned close, her voice low. "You risked everything for me. You nearly doomed us both." Kael grinned, the same crooked grin that had carried him this far. "Yeah, and it was the best bad decision I've ever made." Her laugh rang clear, and for the first time in centuries, the stars felt quiet. The war was over. Two worlds, once enemies, now shared a future. And somewhere in the middle of it all, a human man and an alien woman walked forward together, still arguing, still laughing, still proving that even in the coldest corners of space, love could burn brighter than war. The end.